If this is anything like a Sunday morning, the rest of everybody else will be here in about 10 minutes. So, hey, I really appreciate you all being here this evening. We've never done anything like this, so this is just something kind of new. And I, like I said this morning, really excited about just the direction that Salt Church is going. God's been unbelievably faithful to us since the day that we started. And just to be able to do this so quickly is awesome. But let me go ahead, before we get going, let me open us in a word of prayer. Father, I thank you for tonight. Lord, I thank you for your church. Lord, I thank you for the fact that you wanted this place here. And Lord, you've been unbelievably faithful to us from the beginning. And God, I just pray as we move forward, Lord, we could just be good stewards of your people. Lord, that you would just be able to guide us and lead us in every way that you want. Lord, make your ways clear for this church and just allow us to be ultimately obedient to what you would have for us. Lord, I pray as Brad, Scott, and Daniil give their testimonies tonight, Father, that we could see very clearly how you've worked on their lives, how you've saved them from eternal wrath. And God, you've put them in a position that they didn't really realize they'd ever be in. And so, God, I just pray that you just open up our hearts and minds to what you'd have for us as a church. And Lord, I thank you so much for who you are. It's in your name I pray. Amen. All right, so before they give their testimonies, we've never had like a church-wide meeting. So this is the first time we've ever done this because we don't have like members, we don't have anything. And so I kind of want to give you guys like a synopsis of where we're at as a church. I know a lot of you, and so you know on Sunday mornings I can't see you, so these lights are so bright, I don't even know who's here. But whether you've been coming from the beginning or you just started coming a couple months ago, whatever, I want to give you like a little update on who we are as a church. I talked to a guy before we planted Salt Church. He has a church plant in Plano, Texas. And I called him because his church did awesome things in the first few months. And I was like, hey, Kyle, like, how did you do all that? And he said, Michael, I can tell you how to plant a church in 2018 in Plano, Texas. But that's all I got for you. Your church is going to do whatever it decides to do, and your local context is going to be what it is. So to be honest with you, you've heard me say this in sermons. I'd lay in bed at night thinking to myself, there's not going to be anyone besides people with the last name of Stahl at Salt Church. I never thought people would want to come. I didn't know, even tonight, I don't even know what to expect. I didn't know what to expect. But in the launch phase, we had a launch team of 80 adults and 33 kids. So that was kind of our core group that we used to launch Salt Church in January of 2021. Launch Sunday, we had 275 people, which was awesome. I mean, I had like my high school track coach here, and I told everybody on the launch team, I was like, it's going to go backwards. Like, enjoy the 275. We're never going to have that many people again for a long time. From that point, we did drop the second week. We never have been below 200 people as a church. And then it just kept steadily climbing. As it climbed, I'm like going home every Sunday telling Kristen, like, I don't know what's happening here. This is like abnormal. This is the third church plant I've been a part of, the first one I've ever pastored. But it just kept climbing and climbing and climbing. And then summer hit, it kept climbing and climbing and climbing. And I was telling Pastor Steve from Desert Springs, I don't know why it's growing so fast. So what we started to do as a church to prepare for whatever was going on budget-wise and all that stuff is we started tracking attendance. You'll see Courtney just randomly standing by that exit door. She counts how many people are here. We divide that by our giving, and we're able to determine what our budget will be every year. So we started tracking attendance, not to say, look at how many people go here. It was more just to give us intel on what was happening. And I'll show you the trends of our attendance in a second. So as the church grew, what happened is I never changed. As you all know, if you're here, you probably have my cell phone number. You know where I live. You stop and talk to me. I'm a very relational individual. I think God's wired me to pastor that way. And I don't regret a minute of that. I've had coffee or lunch with everybody on my launch team at least one time. And I will drop everything I'm doing, including writing sermons, to meet with people. But I'm very relational. I stand out in the lobby. Most pastors don't even do that. I very much like being relational. I carry the burdens of the people at this church. If you go on our website, the first thing you see, it says, where the broken can be made whole. We made a conscious decision from day one. We're not going to be a church for pretty people. We're going to be a church where the broken people can walk in here and get redeemed. We've seen miraculous ways that God has worked, but with broken people comes brokenness. And there's nights I lay in bed awake at night thinking of some of you, praying for some of you, with my heart burdened for some of you, to the point where it's not been the most healthy thing. The most helpful article that I've ever read is by a guy named Tim Keller. He pastors a church in New York City, and it's on leadership and church size dynamics. So a quote from his article, you can just Google it and read the article. It's one of the most common reasons for pastoral leadership mistakes is blindness to the significance of church size. Size has an enormous impact on how a church functions. There's a size culture that profoundly affects how decisions are made, how relationships flow, how effectiveness is evaluated, and what ministers, staff, and lay leaders do. So that is 100% true. The bigger the church gets, the more things have to change. So just so you know, how he categorizes church size in this article is a house church would be 0 to 40. A small church would be 40 to 200. So our launch team was considered a small church. Week 2, we never were a small church. We were a medium-sized church. Today, we're considered a large church, according to this article. Very large church would be anything over 800 people. So just so you could see the trends, on the left is 2001 attendance, and then on the right, the teal is 2002. So in July of 2021, we averaged 301 people. 2022, we grew by 37 over a year. August, that jumped up to 342 in 2021. Then we started averaging about 391 in August of this year. September in 2021, we were 318. And then, can you remember COVID came back? And then this year, we averaged 399 in the month of September. October, we had now grown by over 103 on average per week, which takes a toll on a lot of different things. And then so far this month, that's including today's number, we've gone around 100 people. So we've grown 100 people over a year. If your church grows by 15 people in a year, you're a really, really fast-growing church. So this is like a very odd thing that I haven't known like how to deal with. So the point of Tim Keller's article is the main thing that has to change as the church grows is the senior pastor's role. I don't even like calling myself the senior pastor, but that's who I am. I'm the one who planted this place, and I'm the one that very much like has my hands in everything. I have like 18 direct reports, which isn't a healthy thing if you've ever led an organization before. So the whole point of his article is as the church grows, the senior pastor's role has to change. Well, we've gone from a small church to a medium-sized church to a large church basically since like January of this year. So every step we take, the problem is nothing has changed with me. I'm still the same exact guy in the lobby that I was 2 years ago. I just don't know any other way to do it. But with that comes just a lot of very long weeks. I don't say this as a way to brag. There's days where I spend like 5 to 7 hours on the phone. There's days where I will work like 16-hour days every day of the week. For like a few months there, I never took a day off. I would work 7 days a week. And the problem is if this continues, I will burn out. So Pastor Steve at Desert Springs, if you've never met him, he's been the pastor at Desert Springs for 27 years. An unbelievably faithful man of God that literally took a chance to hire me at Desert Springs. I don't know why he did, but I meet with him every other Wednesday. And there's Wednesdays where I walk in and I'm like, Steve, I don't know how to manage all this. I don't know what to do. And this was like end of 2021. And he's like, it might be time for you to start identifying like guys that could come around you and like help you. And I'm like, well, what does that look like? Staff or what? He's like, you need elders. And I'm like, already, like we're not even a year old. He's like, no, you need to start candidating elders. So in January of this year, so 11 months ago, I sat with him. I'd never even sat in an elder meeting before. I was just like, Steve, what am I supposed to look for? And he was like, well, what kind of church are you guys? And I said, we're just a church that we get in the weeds with people. We're willing to get our hands dirty with people. And he's like, well, that's the kind of pastor you are. You got to find guys that are willing to do the same thing. So here's what happened is like, I got to know these guys in all of the launch, like 2021. And then this year in January, I started to take a hard look on like just observing things that I would look for. I knew the qualifications for elder, but one thing I wanted to see is like, does the person love the church? Are they just coming in here and they want a title, they want accolades, or are they willing to literally do anything they can? I can tell you that all three of these guys, anytime we have an event, they're the three that are the last to leave. They will stop everything they're doing in the lobby to pray for someone. They did that without me asking. And so that to me is like, man, these guys are in it. They're in it. And so do they have the heart to serve? Are they willing to do the dirty work, take the trash out to the back, do that stuff regardless of what their title was? And then lastly, are they humble? If you know anybody that leads a team at this church, I try to surround myself with people who are humble, people that don't think much of themselves, people that are able to sit in front of a really difficult conversation within a counseling environment and to be able to look a couple in the eye that's unbelievably broken and not operate with like, well, I'm perfect, so listen to everything I'm going to say. So honestly, the thing I struggle with are people that don't have humble attitudes. They have a hard time. And these three guys, they just operate in that way. So what I started to do is I started to have eyes to see several men that were like this, that fit this role. Again, there was an advantage because these guys were here in 2021. These aren't going to be the only elders that are ever at this church. We want to nominate more elders. We want to grow our elder team as we move forward. So this isn't like a good old boys club. This isn't like Michael chose his friends. I got friends that are better than these guys here at this church. I could just name them. Garrett Cox, John Cascola, Scott Peters. They're not sitting up here right now, okay? This isn't like I looked for people who are my age, okay? None of that is what happened. There's no ageism going on here. None of that. I just look for dudes that are going to roll up their sleeves and look at me and be like, Michael, how can I help? And so what I started to do is I met with about 7 different guys. I just kind of floated it out there. Hey, would you be interested in being an elder? Some of them were like, no, and that made my thing easy. These 3 guys, Scott was probably the hardest one to convince. Be able to meet with them, and I nailed it down to these 3 by the end of March. The vetting process then began in April. So we took a trip, us 4 and Matt Murphy, took a trip to Cleveland, Ohio for a conference at Alistair Begg's church in April. Because we just really love the structure they have at that church. They do things gospel-centered the way that we do. And so that's what we did in April. And from that, the vetting process has begun with these 3 guys. I've met with them individually. There's been things that I've had to try to figure out with all 3 of them, just ways to get to know them. Again, Daniil's been with me from day one. Brad and Scott haven't. So just trying to figure out, okay, I see this in you, but how is this practically going to work? So since that time, since April, I've been meeting with them. And then we also, once a month, go to the elder meeting at Desert Springs. So Desert Springs has 9 guys on the elder team. We go to those meetings and just sit in those meetings, see how they operate those meetings. And then the elders at Desert Springs have come alongside these 3, vetted them as well, and obviously come in agreement with what I see to be able to say, yeah, we're willing to nominate these guys. So that is kind of what it looks like. We, the 4 of us, meet every Thursday at my house at 7:30 p.m., and we are just trying to figure out structure for all kinds of different things. What does it mean to be a member at Salt Church? What is the direction that God wants us to move forward? So again, this is the first time I've ever been through any of this. I can just tell you like the things that I see in these 3. Scott, for example, he's a very quiet guy. Daniil ran security when this church started. Well, nobody ran security, and we realized we should probably have security, and Daniil ran it. And I was like, dude, I don't want you to lead security. Who do you think could lead it? And he said, Scott. I was like, is that the dude that looks like Jesus? And he was like, yeah. And I go, I don't think I've ever heard that guy talk. And he goes, well, I think he's legit. I think that's who I would want to have in charge of security. Scott doesn't know anything about security ministry, but what did he do? He grew that team. He started discipling the men on that team, all without like, I'm the head of security. It was just like, that's the heart God's given him. Brad, as he'll tell in his testimony, was an elder at his church that he came from before this. Brad is somebody theologically. Him and I very much are of the same mind. That's very helpful. Brad is somebody that God has gifted to teach and preach, which I see that in him. Brad is very, very gifted, like organizational structure, things like that, just being able to put things in order. So that is extremely helpful. And then Daniil, I call myself relational. Daniil is like relational times 100. So if you are here, you've probably talked to Daniil at some point. Just if I could have anybody in the trenches with me to go to war, it'd be Daniil. And so this is those three guys. And then I preached on the elder qualifications this morning. You guys know what those are. If you weren't here this morning, it's already up on YouTube. If you want to watch, it's a weird sermon. But that's what the qualifications are. So here's what we're going to do, is I'm going to allow these guys to give their testimony. I am going to open this up for questions. You will ask me the questions. This isn't time to like, hey, Daniil, what do you think about like biblical reasons to get a divorce? You can grab lunch with Daniil and ask him that. If you have any concerns about any of these three guys, again, they're not going to be installed as elders unless they meet the qualifications. I've vetted them. The Desert Springs guys have vetted them. I don't see anything in them, but if you do, that would be something where you can email me. I would love to have a phone call with you. I don't have time to do lunch and coffee with everybody if there's a bunch of concerns. But again, I would love to talk with you about that. So if we could keep the questions in line of like church leadership structure, direction of Salt Church, things like that, I would appreciate that. This isn't a time to like, this isn't an ordination service where we're going to split hairs theologically, anything like that. Just want to be able to answer any questions that you all would have. So last thing I'll say is this. There's a million different ways to structure an elder board. I could care less what these three guys do for work. Scott works for like a jacuzzi company. Daniil works for USAA, and Brad works for Night. He's the only Christian in a Mormon organization, Night Transportation. I don't care what their roles are, how much money they make, how influential they are. None of that means anything to me. It's their heart for the Lord. I could put all these successful businessmen in an elder meeting with me, but at the end of the day, can I put them in front of a couple that's about to be divorced? That's the question I had to ask. So again, these guys meet that qualification from a godly character standpoint, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over. Scott has volunteered to go first, and I am been up all day. I had family Thanksgiving. I'm going to take a nap on this couch.
Thanks. Most of you know me. I'm Scott. My wife, Anna, and our 4 kids are Reagan, Easton, Shyla, and Calvin. I was born in a Christian home over in L.A. My dad was hired to be a pastor of a small church in Seattle, so we moved up there when I was pretty young. I don't really remember a time when I didn't believe in Jesus. There was a key moment as a boy that I can recall. After a church service, I was just kind of milling around on the steps outside and just prayed and did business with God. And even at that point, it kind of felt like a reaffirmation for me, like, you know, are you real? I do believe in you type of thing as like a 7-year-old. And I look back at that as, you know, legitimate spirit working in my heart at that time. Growing up in the church, you know, my parents were hugely influential. They're, you know, very godly people. My mom was really kind of my emotional counselor growing up, and my dad was kind of the theologian, you know, go to him with Bible questions type stuff for me. And church life was great. You know, I grew up in a, like, you know, conservative evangelical vein, and that was just hugely influential for me to just instill my faith. Later on, kind of through adolescence, things got tough. You know, adolescence is for most of us. And it was really through other men in the church that came around me, discipled me, that really helped me get through some of that stuff. The other emphasis I would put on is Bible camp is really near and dear to my heart. Every summer go up and serve or just be a camper and make friends and hear the word and experience, really like compressed Christian community. And, going through public school, you got the culture always pulling on you. And those summer camps were really kind of the time to refresh and recharge. After high school, I was really trying to figure out what to do with myself, and really wasn't interested in college at the time. And so I just started working, but I really went through this time of searching, and I wasn't really searching for God. I was good with God. I was solid in my faith, but I was searching like for direction, and then I was discovering that I was really frustrated with just the nature of life. That I was staring down, the rest of my life, several decades of figuring out what am I going to do. And in the end, I'm kind of like, well, it doesn't matter what I do. It's all kind of pointless in the end. Doesn't matter what career I choose. It doesn't add up to much. And so I was kind of going through this angst of the frustration of the nature of life. And my dad really turned me on to the book of Ecclesiastes, and it really became my favorite book. It was hugely just comforting to me to find in the Bible the same experience that I was having, and that it had all the wisdom on how to deal with that. That it was okay to feel like life is just frustrating and doesn't seem to have a point. But that, the joy and contentment from God is to accept that this is the way He has designed it, and that the true meaning and satisfaction we're all looking for is in the next life. During this time, too, I was really trying to be the godliest man I could be, and kind of discovered that I was working really hard, kind of in my own effort, and kind of just struggling with the failure. Every day you just get to the end of the day and feel like, well, I can't get there. And, the things that I don't want to do, I keep doing, and I can't do the things I want to do, right? And just that sin that's always there. And I kind of despaired for a while, but that was a time where God really worked in my life to help me understand more deeply the nature of grace, and to live in that kind of reliance on Him, and understanding that I'm good, that I'm justified, my sins are cleared. The things I just did, things I'm about to do that may not be so selfless or right, those are covered, and I can keep moving on. Also at that time, I was in a relationship that didn't work out, and that was really hard, and waited for a while before venturing out again, and just kind of praying for God to bring someone to me. And my dad just kind of was like, Scotty, you got to get out there and take action, you can't just wait around. And I said, yeah, okay, but I did wait around, and actually God did answer that prayer. Anna showed up in my church, and what can I say? She made an impression. So we, I asked her out, and we hit it off, and we were married within a year of our first date. And from there, life was good. We started having kids, and we were enjoying church life and serving. And, both our families were in the same church. We had always wanted to move to Arizona, or at least somewhere sunny and warm, get out of the clouds of Seattle. But never felt really right about it. And a few years ago, Anna comes to me and says, Scott, it's like, we got to do this, Are we just going to wait till we retire? Like, we've always wanted to do this. Let's do it now. And I said, okay, and we started moving towards that goal. And the cool thing that God did providentially during that process was with my job. I was managing a service department, had technicians under me. We came down here and we're looking at houses and interviewing for jobs, and that was going well. The day I got back, my boss asked if I'd be willing to transfer to another position. That position was something that could be done remotely. And I said, well, that's very interesting. I'm planning on moving. Could I do that remotely? And he said, no problem. And that for me was kind of that final stamp of approval that God was behind the move. Allowed me to keep my salary. I didn't have to start over somewhere making less money. And then we started coming to Desert Springs through the recommendation of our realtor, Janelle Lloyd, some of you may know. And we were liking it. COVID happened, so we never quite got into it. But we kept hearing about this church plant in Waddell, which is where we live. And I really felt compelled to do it, to be a part of it. I thought it sounded really cool to be part of a plant. I thought there'd be lots of opportunities to serve, and talked and prayed about it with Anna, and I look at that as just God really prompting me to do it, and here we are, and we love it, and it's why at this point, I accepted with some reluctance Michael's invitation to serve as an elder. Just like to share a little bit about kind of how I view myself in the role and my heart. I really, like Michael said, I'm quieter, I'm more behind the scenes, but I really have a heart to work with broken people, to disciple men. So really I see myself in kind of a pastoral care role, whether that's families or community group or whatever. I also just recently have been more burdened too for that people really know what conversion is. I think there's a lot of people walking around in church that think they're okay with God and they're not. And I think we need to give people clear doctrine, that people really understand what rebirth is, what being born again is, what faith in Christ really looks like. I think a lot of people are kind of getting gospel light, in a lot of churches, L-I-T-E, not L-I-G-H-T. And they're basically getting a view of Jesus that kind of relegates him to being a life coach and not being Lord. And that's something that is just something that I'm burdened for, is that those two who may be converted but don't understand very deeply, that they just come to have the kind of theological tools to make their calling and election sure, that they can be confident in what they know, and they can go to Scripture and see that, and then they can examine their lives and grow and bear fruit. And that's what we're really here to do, is to equip the saints so that you guys can all find your niche in ministry and grow the body of Christ. So that's me.
I have a lot to follow up from you, man. That sounded good. All right, good. First of all, my name is Daniil Castillo. I'm the old guy in the group. I'll be 46 this year, and my knees are beginning to not enjoy me being overweight. But anyways, I wanted to tell you, all of you here at the church, that my life was pretty interesting growing up in a household where my mom was the one who would instill us going to church. So it was really a weird dynamic. My mom was the Bible reader, and my dad, growing up in a household where we were multicultural, he grew up in the Catholic Church for years, and he had some really bad experiences, so he was really reluctant about going back to church. And it was hard for me growing up in a household, too, because my dad is Mexican and my mom was black, and I didn't really get a chance to know my grandmother on my dad's side very well. She was somewhat racist, so she didn't really want a part of our lives. And as a young boy growing up, I didn't understand it, and it was kind of hard for me to express it to my dad. But he always kind of shielded us from that other side of our family, because he wanted to be the best dad that he could be, because he didn't have a dad growing up. So he followed with my mom and took us to church. And let me tell you, we went to a lot of churches. We went from churches where they were running up and down the aisles. We went to churches where they were throwing the Holy Spirit all over the place. We went to churches where they had two people teaching at the same time. Like, you name it. It was wild, and I was a little bit confused as a young man growing up, going to church, seeing all of this stuff happen. Well, I remember about the age of 12, we went to a church where I'd first heard the gospel, like, really taught. And it kind of just struck a chord in me one night, like, if this whole thing is real, like, I'm wagering a lot on me not knowing who Jesus is. And I remember at the age of 13, I had heard the gospel taught again. And I remember sitting with my mom, and my mom said to me, it's so important that you have your own relationship with God. Like, I've taught you what God's word says. Me and your dad have done our best to try to guide you to Jesus, but it's your own decision. And I remember sitting there that night at my house, probably about the age of 13. I was like, man, this is a lot to wager on my life, not knowing who Jesus is. So the next week, I went there to church, and we had our youth pastor there. His name was Leo. I remember like it was yesterday. Went over the gospel with me again, and being a young man like that light switch just went off, like this is all real. And he said, well, if you want to be saved, let's pray right now. And I did. And at that point in time, I didn't understand the scriptures fully and everything with it, but I knew at that point in time that God had called me out to do this and to be a man of God. And I was afraid at first because I remember hearing all these things you had to do. I was like, I can't do all those things. And after weeks and weeks and weeks of hearing the study with him, showing you what God has expectations for us to do, I realized I wasn't alone. And by hearing that message, I began to realize my life is going to be forever changed making this decision. And I remember telling my mom, I was so excited, and we were living in a really bad neighborhood at that time. We were living in Maryvale, and where I was living at, there was a lot of gang violence where I was living at in the area I was in. And my mom, I remember at the age of 14, came to us and said, hey, I know you guys love going to church here, but we need to move, because we woke up in that morning and there was gun shells all over our front patio. And my mom said to me, I'm not going to bury my son. So it was time for us to move. And we ended up moving to another neighborhood for a period of time. And during that time frame, I was trying to find a new church because we weren't going to church there anymore. So I went to start going to church at Calvary Chapel, probably around the age about 15 or so. Decided to dive more into the Word and realize, like, I want to be a part of this in some capacity. And I began to get really close with the youth pastor there. Went, like you said, on a bunch of Bible camp trips and getting a chance to hear more about the gospel. I ended up finishing up high school and had absolutely no idea what I was going to do, like probably a lot of people are when they get out of high school. But I decided, hey, if I truly and dearly believe this, like, I need to start taking some Bible classes and to dive deeper in. So I decided to go to school over at Grand Canyon. And at that time, Grand Canyon University was 2 buildings. So that's how old I am. It was literally 2 buildings. They had the main building, and they had the area where you go to do worship, and that was it. There was nothing else there. And they had apartments that were way, way in the back that were maybe about 600 yards away from the school, and that was the whole school. I took a bunch of Bible classes, and I was telling myself, hey, I want to go in the medical field. I didn't. I was just going to school to say I was going to school and racking up bills that I ended up paying until I was 35 years old. And at that time, it was so cool how God was working. I grew up in a neighborhood where all the kids, we always used to rap at each other and have fun and all that stuff. And one day I met these guys at school, and they said, hey, do you want to join a band with us? And I was like, all right, whatever. So I decided to do it. So I was a front man. And then all of a sudden, not even 2 or 3 weeks later, a record label calls us. And they say, hey, we heard you guys playing at this place, and we'd love to have you. Well, the problem was the guys that were in the band with me were doing 2 different things, and they weren't willing to do it. So I had to find some new people. So I found some young boys at the church that were with us, that went to school with me part-time. The other ones were too young, and we decided to form a band, and that record label said, hey, we still want you. So 6 weeks later, I'm flying out to Nashville, and I'm at Black Horse Studios outside of Nashville recording our first album. I was like, God, so this is what you want me to do? And I remember him saying it like very clearly to me, go. And I was scared to death. I'm like, just out of high school, getting ready to record this album, and figure out what's left in my life. And then we recorded our first album. I was on tour with a whole bunch of Christian bands. I remember being on tour. I don't know if you guys remember a thing called Acquire the Fire with Ron Luce, and we were traveling from Alaska to Florida to you name it. Like I went all over just about all 50 states, getting a chance to share the gospel through music. And then I remember coming home and realizing like I actually have to do something with my life, and I got to start paying that school bill that's still racking up, right? So I decided to realize, hey, I'm going to do that. And I had a job, and I was working at this time at a little itty-bitty video place called Hollywood Video. Anybody ever remember that place? Yeah. I was the guy wearing the cummerbund that was out of shape and the bow tie. That was me. And the funny thing is, my wife will tell you this, I had blonde hair at the time. Don't ask, okay? But anyways, I was working there, and I had remember working there one day, and my wife didn't know she was going to be my wife, walked in, and no joke, I said to myself, that's going to be wifey right there. Like, that's literally what I told myself. And my wife at the time thought I was creepy, but doesn't matter. I won her over. But it was really cool because during that time frame I had met her, I knew like I want to date her, but she wasn't Christian. So God had taken me away on tour, and I went to tour for almost a year, right, hon? And I come back, and she goes, like, my friends that I went to school with invited me to church, and I accepted the Lord, and I'm getting my life straight with God. And I was like, now it's on. Like, I was like, I'm ready to go do this. So we started dating for a while, and I knew she was the one. We just hit it off really well. She was really well balanced. It was a little bit of a challenge. I don't think her mom liked me too much at first, but didn't matter. I was going to marry her. And we ended up making a decision, well, let's go ahead and get married. We've been married now 20 years, and she's put up with a lot of dumb stuff I've done along the way. But I tell you, getting an opportunity to work and be involved in church has really given me an opportunity to see how I need to treat my wife. And I tell you, I've made a ton of mistakes, but over the years, I've just gone back to God and saying, God, show me in your word what I'm supposed to be doing. And through that process, she's been so patient and so understanding through it, because I'm Mr. Fix-It. I want to hammer everything out and make sure it gets done. And she's just been like, you know what? I'll stay with you through this and love on you and pray with you through this process. She's been amazing through this. So through that whole process, when we first got married, I knew I was supposed to go back into ministry, but I didn't know how or what to do during that time frame. And I started going to church over at Desert Springs. And I became involved with the youth because I just had a heart for youth, and I still do. I love kids. I think they're amazing. And doing that, I stayed there for about, 3 years? 3 years we stayed there. And there was an opportunity to help do their very first church plant over at Mission Church. I had no idea what I was doing and how I was going to do any position, but they said, hey, we don't have a youth pastor. Would you be interested in doing it? And my wife goes, do I have to call you a pastor now? And I was like, yes. But she was being very sarcastic about it. But anyways, I decided to take that position, and I just fell in love with kids and get an opportunity to teach the gospel. Each and every Sunday, I had such a great opportunity to teach these kids, and I did that for several years. And then it was one of those points in time where I knew God was calling me to do something else. I just didn't know what. And in doing so, during that time frame, I was going back to school to get my bachelor's to finish up what I started years before that. And I finally finished that out and got a chance to get that done. But during that time frame of me walking away from the church over there with it, it was time for me to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And I knew God was telling me, hey, you're done over here at Mission, but what's next? And I will be the first one to be honest with you. I was a little bitter about some things that had happened with me, and I was trying to understand going through my life, like, God, what are you trying to show me? And I remember like it was yesterday, he reaches out to me, and I talked to Michael, and it was so funny. I wish you guys could have been there. The very first time I met Michael, I put him through the ringer, man. I gave him the whole 9 yards, and if he was a punching bag, he took every shot, because I wanted to make sure the next place I go to, I didn't want to just leave. I wanted a place that I could call home and to be able to go and serve somewhere, but I didn't know in what capacity. And a lot of you guys don't know this, but Michael didn't come to my house once. He came to my house like 3 times before I was willing to say, hey, I'm going to join you. But I told him very seriously, like, I'm one of the most loyal guys you'll ever meet. If something goes down and it goes bad for you, I'm going to be in the trenches with you because that's just the way I grew up. If you make a commitment, you stick it through. And he met with me several times, and I told him, yeah, I'll join you. And, you know, it was one of those things me and my wife prayed about because I really didn't even know what position I was going to do. But when I came over here, I knew that God had called me to be here and to have an opportunity to work with people in any capacity to share the gospel. And through that whole process, I've learned so much being able to be a part of this church. I've learned that number one thing I've learned since I've been here, it's not about me. It's about sharing the gospel and loving on the people that are within the church. And one thing that I wanted to let you guys know as I wrap this up, what I wrote out here, and I want to make sure you have an understanding why I took the opportunity to even want to entertain the thought of being an elder. I understand the severity behind what we're doing. I understand that God has called us out amongst the flock to lead. And as an elder, I make the promise to help guide the church and teach and obey and enforce the word of God in all aspects of my life. And that means by leading the people here within the church. And that means standing before you and God as a believer and a follower of Jesus Christ, proclaiming his rule, his truth, and his commands. And I will do my best in every possible capacity to always make sure my ears are open to hear you and my heart's open to always share the gospel with you. As many of you know, I've gone to your house and met with you or talked with you because my heart truly and dearly is meant to serve the Lord. And that means going out and meeting with the people wherever you're at to guide you back to Jesus. And the verse that sticks in my mind, and I will wrap this up with, is in Acts 20:28 says, keep watch over yourselves and all of the flock in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. Be shepherds of the church of God, which he has bought with his own blood. And I believe that with all my core, and I will do the best I possibly can as an elder to live that out each and every time that I have an opportunity to meet with any one of you, both in church, outside of church. I'm an elder not only when I walk in this building, but even in my own life, to reciprocate that in all aspects. And I pray that you guys have that opportunity to not only continue to pray for Michael, but pray for us for wisdom, because there's a lot of things that are going on within the church, and we really want to do our best to serve God first and to do our best to watch over the flock.
I remember your blonde hair, believe it or not.
It wasn't good. I'm bald now.
Yeah.
I used to have a fro and I would just put a pick in there.
We didn't know this, but Daniil and I had a run-in like 20, maybe 22, 23 years ago. Band name was American Made. Music's still out on YouTube, by the way. I found it. Yeah, it's good stuff. But yeah, I attended a concert. I think it was one of those things that the Choir of the Fire things. It was at my church that I grew up at, and you were there, and I bought a CD and I had it signed by you, and then here we are all these years later.
It has no nominal value, so don't worry about it.
I tried to sell it on eBay. I had like no views.
I think somebody returned it back to you. Huh?
I thought it was somebody else. Well, hey, it was kind of weird. I was trying to think of, my name's Brad, by the way, Brad Hart. I'm married. I have a beautiful wife, Jessica. I have 2 kids, Landon and Charlotte. And she's smiling because I mentioned her name on stage. She's all excited about it. No, I had to really think about kind of like a testimony. This is the first time I've actually really kind of shared that. I was always one of those guys, so I'm like, well, everybody's got the same testimony. We're all, lost and dead in our sin and made alive by Christ and saved for good works. So we all have kind of like a similar testimony. But very much so like Scott, I grew up in a home. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, and I grew up in a home where my parents went to church from the time I was probably an infant. I'm not sure, but very young. And I grew up in Southern California, and the church we went through a lot of phases. And I bring this up because it has part of an integral part of my story. But I think originally it might have been a Baptist church, but when I was younger, it was very much like an evangelical Baptist church. Very not so catechism, 1689 confession, confessional Baptist church, but a little more loose, progressive. And then it, morphed into, I think for the better part of 22 years that we were there, morphed into something else. It grew up to like 16,000 people. It was very experiential and things like that. But, at the time I grew up very involved. My dad played on the worship team for most of those years. My mom served in a lot of areas like MOPS and women's Bible studies. And so I was very accustomed to, serving in the church, being in the church. And it was like, I want to say it was about 8th grade or so. Or no, I'm sorry, going back like 6th grade. This is like junior high. It's probably when I met you, man. You didn't even know it. It was probably about 6th grade. We're at a junior high night, like one of those midweek services, couple hundred kids. We broke out in a small group after service, and I don't remember what we talked about in that small group. I just remember Doug. Doug was a really cool guy. He just gotten out of active duty Army. He was in the reserve. Like when he wasn't on reserve duty, he was surfing. So like Doug was like my hero. But he was a really cool guy, and we were talking through something in our group. It was just a group of 6th and 7th and 8th grade boys, and something hit me. And in that, and again, I don't remember exactly what was said, but I just remember being overwhelmed with the reality of sin in my life. And I didn't say anything, and I think Doug could tell. And so we, the night ended, and we're all going outside to wait for cars to pull up, and we always had Miguel's Junior burritos served. For those of you guys who are from Southern Cal, you guys know what I'm talking about. I did hear a woo. Who said woo? That was my wife. You don't count. Never mind. Miguel's Junior burritos, legit. So we always got Miguel's Junior burritos. They were like $1 before inflation. So Doug bought my burrito, and he was like, "Hey man, what's going on?" And I just opened up. I shared with him. I was like, I was a crying mess. I'm just like vomiting out all these sins in my life, all these grotesque sins a 6th grader went through, but I'm like, I'm lying to my parents. I'm like cheating. I'm in school. I'm just doing all these things. And I was just broken over it. A few weeks later, I got baptized, and on a Sunday morning. And I was given a Bible from the church as a gift, and I remember the following week, that entire week, I read through the entire Gospel of Matthew. A fire was lit. I was fired up. I was zealous. I'm like preaching Christ to like my neighbors, and one of my neighbor kids, Chris, we're still friends to this day, but his family was Mormon at the time, and I told him he didn't believe the same Jesus I believed, and the Jesus he believed is not the Jesus in the Bible, and he's probably going to hell. And I remember telling him that, and his parents came over and had a lively discussion with my parents that night, but they're not Mormon anymore. Anyways, long story short, but that was who I was. And then there was some fractions happening in the church we were at. There may or may not have been an IRS investigation. A lot of things. People were laid off and fired, and just a lot of brokenness in that church. And so my parents left, and we were really good friends with a family through soccer. My sister played club soccer. And the coach, they also had 3 kids, him and his wife, and all 3 were the exact same age of me and my siblings. And so we got along very well. He was a Lutheran pastor. And so when we had left our church, we went down the street. It was only 3 blocks away to a Lutheran church. And this isn't a knock on Lutheranism by any means, but when I'm a fired up, zealous, 7th grader, at a very experiential church, going to a Lutheran church of 200 people and very liturgical setting, I was confused, especially as a 7th grader. So that kind of dampened the fire quite a bit, and there just wasn't a lot of opportunity that I had at the other church, and so I was kind of confused. I saw 2 different realities, 2 different church styles. I just didn't know kind of what was what. And that lasted for a while, and then went through high school just still kind of like a wet towel on a fire. We went back to the old church that we went to and grew up there. I graduate, go to some community college for a semester. I get a job, and then my buddy, my pastor's kid friend, they had moved to Arizona, and he asked me to come out here, told me that ASU was wild, and so you have to come. So I went, And by this point, my parents are divorced. My family life is just jacked up. I'm very angry. I was kind of angry with God. I was angry with a lot of people. I was angry with the church because every time I walked into a Sunday morning service, I just saw a bunch of fake people. I was just a hot mess. So came out to Arizona. That lasted like 7 months, and didn't do so well. I tried to go to ASU, didn't get accepted. So I went to a community college, and then pretty much just stayed up like every night drinking and just partying. Never really got anything crazy, but it was just going to a lot of college parties at ASU and drinking and just not being responsible. And then I remember one night just like coming home from work, just a mess. I'm like, this isn't right. Like, I've got to do something about my life. This isn't good. I called my buddy's dad, the Lutheran pastor, and I was like crying to him, like, what do I do? And he goes, you need to, probably go back to California. Like, as much as we love you here, as much as you're like, we've kind of adopted you, you got to go back and restart. So I called my dad. He came out 2 days later, packed me up, and I was back in California. Went back to work at the same place I worked at before I left for Arizona, and I had met Jess back then. I was stricken then, but she was like taken. She was with some knucklehead for like 4 years, her high school sweetheart. And on my arrival, on my return, I found out she was done with that guy, and I was really excited. So I went out of my way to try to like convince her, although I'm not like a good-looking dude, I've got a good heart. So anyway, I tried to pursue her, and so a bunch of friends from work were going to a Denny's late night, like after work, real snazzy place. And I was like, cool, here's my opportunity. I'm going to sit next to Jess. I had this all planned out in my head, and then I get there late, and she's sitting next to this other guy that I knew, and like they're holding hands, and I was like sad. And so then I tried to convince her that guy was too a knucklehead, and I did. She'll tell you, I'm not going to get into this now, but I ultimately pursued Jess for 2 years before she agreed to go out with me. So we went on our first date, which she stood me up for. Her and I have different recollections of the excuse she gave, but either way, we both agree she stood me up intentionally. So anyway, I still convinced her. We went out, and the problem, though, was that she had a very similar history that I did. I was just getting back into church when I moved back to California. I went right back to the same church I went to. They had started a next-gen ministry, which is like young adults, like 18 to 25 or something like that. It was really big. It was like 3,000 people on like a Wednesday night. It was ridiculous. Like fog machines and lasers and Cirque du Soleil. I'm not kidding. They really had like Cirque du Soleil dancers like during worship hanging from ropes off the skyriser things, whatever those are. It was weird. It was a weird church. Anyway, she had a very similar experience, like broken church in a Baptist environment, and they had left, and she was not going to church. So I decided to do missionary dating. And I tried to convince her that she had to come back to church, or otherwise she couldn't date me. And these last 2.5 years were a waste. She did. She came to church with me, and that was like our real official first date was church, actually. And then the rest is history. We just grew there. I was asked to be an intern. I was just serving. Like, that's all I was doing. I was just serving. And they were like, hey, have you ever thought about going into full-time ministry? And I'm like, no, not at all. And they were like, cool, you should be an intern. And I was like, okay. So I interned. You could either be a pastoral intern or an administrative intern. I picked pastoral, and then they had me like preach to like the high schoolers on a midweek night. And then the next day they said, you're not going to be a pastoral intern. You're going to be an administrative intern. And so that's a true story. Not that any of this isn't a true story. But no, yeah, so I was like an administrative guy and just doing all the behind-the-scenes stuff and like leading teams and organizing schedules and calendars and all kinds of crazy stuff. But what I learned was that ministry then became a crutch because I had not dealt with I had not fully repented of some of the sin that I dealt with in my previous years. I was still carrying that. I was still committing some of those things. And being in ministry, I was able to hide that, particularly at the church that we were at, where it wasn't about sound doctrine. It wasn't about preaching from the gospel. It was like TED Talks and Cirque du Soleil, and you could hide in that very easily. And I did. And then it caught up with me. And it became very apparent that I was still unrepentant. And so I went through a restoration process, and then there was some things going on in that church on staff, and a lot of hurt happened, and I became very angry with like the functional church, like the organizational church, and we left, and we left on a really bad note, and harmed relationships, and anyway, I just started kind of like Scott, like thinking like, man, what's next? Like, what am I going to be doing? Like, I was an intern. I thought I was going to go into ministry. Clearly that's not the plan. And I was dealing with some sin in my life. And, thankfully I had a really good friend that, who was a pastor that walked through some things with me, kind of led me through a restoration path. And it was very helpful. And I ended up at another church plant in California, in Orange County. And, Jess and I started getting plugged in there, and then that's kind of when I got into more of kind of like a Reformed theology was there, and then we moved to Arizona. I lost my job, moved to Arizona about 10 years ago. Moved to Arizona about 10 years ago. Came out here. I'm like cage stage, like Calvinist, like. You guys know what that is. Like, that's who I was when I first moved out here. And so we started going around to a bunch of churches out in the West Valley. We moved to Goodyear. We could not find a church where either kids ministry was like lacking, because that was very important to us. We just had Landon. Charlotte wasn't quite born yet. Kids ministry was very important to us. Or like we wound up in a lot of churches that just didn't preach the Bible. And it was, more, again, some of the things I experienced in California, just experiential, life coaching type stuff, and not a lot of gospel. And so I got really frustrated. We ended up finding a church in downtown Phoenix. It was the remnant of Mars Hill, Phoenix, but Mars Hill shut down, and then they planted Phoenix Bible Church from that, from a few guys that led that church. So we wound up at Phoenix Bible Church, which, again, was another church plant. And they were like 4 months old at the time, and it was like 70 people, and we'd been there, 6 or 7 years, something like that, and I grew there. I fell in love with the church there. I fell in love with the people of God there, not just the local expression of the church, but globally, and what God is doing in and through churches all around the world. And so through that process became an elder, and went through a very rigid vetting process. I think Jess went through almost a similar vetting process just to make sure, she was on board with it. But it was very good for both of us. And then COVID happened. A lot of things happened within that church. By all means, I can talk to, if any of you guys have questions on that, I can talk to you about that. But here, I'll just keep it simple. We left Phoenix Bible Church. It was a very hard thing to do. But in the process of thinking about leaving Phoenix Bible Church, a friend of mine, a couple friend of ours, they were in the Air Force. They were here temporarily. They had switched from PBC and went to Desert Springs. And this guy was like, hey, I want to go to this men's camp. I've never been to like a men's church camp before. Do you have any advice? And I was like, well, they can either be really weird or they can be really helpful. But there's never an in-between. So you're really gambling. And I was like, I've never been to Desert Springs, but how about I'll sign up with you, because they had like a 2-for-1, or not 2-for-1, it was like a discount. You buy like 2 for a discount. So I'm like, you know what, I'll go with you, man. Like, we'll go. We'll do some weird men's church camp stuff together. And we went, and Pastor Michael was, you were the first or second night teaching. I don't remember. Second night, yeah. Anyway, so Michael was like the second night guy teaching. The first night guy was really good too. But I heard Michael preach, and I'm like, man, I like this guy. Like, this guy's got some really good preaching. And I I didn't really think anything of it. And they were like, Salt Church, Waddell. And I was like, Waddell? Like, that's weird. Like, a bunch of, like, cowboys in Waddell. Like, we're going to downtown Phoenix, like, where all the hipsters are. Anyway, so we had ultimately left. They were doing a food truck night here. I think it was that just before Salt? Actually, first Sunday? Yeah, so we went to a food truck night. I love food, if you can't tell. And so I'm like, well, let's go. We walked over here from our neighborhood. We also live right down the street. And I met Michael and met a bunch of people. Met Daniil, met a bunch of people. And I'm like, this could be it. I met Michael at men's camp. Like, he preached really well. And there's a church like 5 minutes away. We don't have to drive an hour each way into church anymore. Like, we could go like 5 minutes. So we did, and we've been here ever since, and we've loved it. I absolutely love this church. My family loves this church. There's amazing people that do amazing things here for the Lord, and that is rare. I have a little bit of a bias, but I can tell you this church is an absolutely incredible place, and I'm not shocked looking at the numbers why it's growing, because there are people that are hungry for the Word of God. There are people that are eager to have real, raw life relationships with other believers and go out and do the ministry arm in arm together. And so it doesn't surprise me to see the numbers the way that they are. I think it's going to be more, and we have to serve well. We have to serve one another well. This isn't just Michael's job or any of the other leaders here that lead a team. It is everyone that calls this place home. It is our job to serve one another, to love one another, to exhort and to care for one another. And so that is our job. My passion for the church, Michael kind of mentioned it, like I have a gifting for like organizational stuff. That's how I ended up like an administrative intern. I really enjoy that. I love trying to like think things through. I'm always like walking around trying to figure out, like, no matter if I'm at work or here at my house, like there's a better way to do something. So that's just kind of how my mind works. But my passion is really for biblical marriages and biblical families. I really believe this is exemplified in Scripture. This is exemplified in early church history. Local expression of churches are the building blocks of families that are like the microcosms of what you see in church, right? And so they're, family worship, reading of Scripture in your homes, devotions, prayer, and what you see happening in a church is what should be happening in our homes. And then we come together as family units doing that together, all in one, to encourage one another and to love those that are maybe coming in for the first time and don't know Christ. And so that's my passion. Biblical marriages is absolutely my passion. I've seen it exemplified in all the wrong ways, and I'm certainly not perfect at it either. Jess and I have been through a lot of stuff, but we both love the Lord, and Christ is the center of our marriage, and there's ways to do that, and so that's that. The end.
Awesome. Well, hopefully that was, helpful. I'm going to sit down. I'm always up here standing up. This kind of feels good. I might do this every Sunday. Hopefully you're picking up, just hearing briefly from them who they are as men. They're guys that have become my friends and guys that I can surround myself with. So, again, if you have any specific questions for any of the three of them, just approach them. They'd love to talk to you over the phone, grab a cup of coffee with you, grab lunch with you. Daniil's the only one with a credit card, so maybe Brad and Scott go to coffee. Daniil, he could take you to lunch. But yeah, they would love to. If you have any further questions for them, go for it. But this is what time is it? 7:04. Maybe we'd take like 10 minutes or whatever. Mary Stahl, the great Mary Stahl, has a microphone. And she will go around. If you have a specific question that I could help answer or bring clarity to anything, I would love to be able to do that. So I think Ken, right behind you, whose Rams lost again today. Yeah.
Why bring a negative thing like that into a positive meeting? Question I have real quick, Pastor, is all three of these gentlemen took the time to mention their wonderful partners that God provided for them to walk along their paths. In your vetting process with meeting with them, and they've had a lot of meetings, did any of these meetings also involve meeting with the spouses to let them know what their husbands are getting into and what is going to be involved?
Yeah, not up until this point. So we've brought them intentionally to this point. There's been a lot of work that I've had to do just with them to meet. But I will have a one-on-one meeting with each of their spouses just to kind of see where they're at in the process. Again, this does not get finalized until the end of January. So there's time left to do that. I'm a firm believer that I've had to work things out with them before I want to go to their spouse. And so it's primarily, you look at the qualifications for elder, it is the man. So I've wanted to make sure we could bring them up into this point. And again, there's still a month, 2 months left in this process. But I do plan on, it's Anna, Andrea, and Jessica. I do plan on speaking with all three of them for sure. That's it. So this is like newcomer's dessert. Y'all don't have any questions? No.
So have you guys started working on like the Constitution and bylaws and all that kind of cool stuff? The really important rules and stuff?
Yeah, so Desert Springs, how it works is since Desert Springs are a sending church, they essentially hand us their constitution. So a lot of people don't even know like a church has a constitution, but those are all the bylaws of how we operate as a church. So I'll say this, we are not Desert Springs. There are some things that as a body of Christ, I think like we have different philosophies, not like crazy different philosophies, but we have different philosophies on how to do things. So they have like a constitution that is like the book of Psalms, okay? It's thick. They handed us like a dumbed down version because a lot of stuff in their constitution isn't stuff that we do, nor do we ever really plan on doing. So they gave us a constitution based off of like what our church looks right now. We started going through that. We got that constitution handed to us 2 weeks ago. We started going through that on Thursday night. On the first page, there's 7 articles. We got to Article 2 in 2 hours. So it is like a painstaking process. But the fact of the matter is, just the way this all goes, they cannot be installed as elders until the Constitution is tied up. So once that Constitution is in place, we give that back to Desert Springs. If there's any changes that we want to make to the Constitution, the 4 of us have to sit in front of the elders at Desert Springs and defend why we made that decision. And then together, they'll basically hand us the Salt Church Constitution. The day that happens, they would be good to go to install as elders.
Good evening, gentlemen. Question with the Constitution coming up and the permanency not until January, will you guys be looking at a Moses-type leadership, or will this be an actual 4-panel vote on different things that pertain to the church, including the Constitution starting in January?
So decisions that are made for the Constitution are the 4 of us that make those decisions. So this, and my desire, and it kind of has been like this the entire time, like when we get together, the 4 of us, I'm very much like running the show during that meeting. That's not like the intention behind it, but I think I'm just privy to everything because I planted the church. So it's like a lot of bringing these guys up to speed with like what's going on within the context of the church. And then there's things like, I'm a firm believer in plurality of leadership. I don't think this place is healthy if it's just built off of me and decisions that I make. So there's been specific things that I've intentionally waited to do until I've had guys that are in place that could help me make those decisions. So for an example, like church membership, I could have just made those decisions by myself, but I don't think that's a healthy thing. I think it's good to talk with like-minded individuals to do that. So right now, like literally Thursday night, and then we're meeting again Tuesday because Thursday's Thanksgiving. We will get together and we're really hammering out like what are the qualifications intentions to be a member because we want to roll membership out next year. So right now it's like I would functionally be considered like the chairman of the elder board, but that's not the intention moving forward. There would be somebody else that would essentially be the chairman of the elder board. I am an elder among equals. My vote doesn't count for 2, it counts for 1. Obviously it's awkward because there's 4 of us, so what do you do on a 2-2 split? We just stay up all night until it's a 3-1. So that's what our plan is. So again, I am very, very cognizant of like what this church has been built off of. I'm not very comfortable with that. I hear a lot of people that, I love your sermons, Michael, and we don't like when you take weeks off. I don't like that. I want other men that can lead. But trust me, I will fight tooth and nail for this church. I named this church, that logo, all that stuff. But again, if I lose a vote, that's okay. That's the plurality thing that comes behind it. Hopefully that helps.
God, your marriage, your children, and then church. And I want to know, do those men up there agree with that set of priorities? And if they do, has it been articulated to their spouses? And what does that agreement look like between these men and their spouses?
Yeah, I mean, that's a common theme that you're going to see for all 4 of us. It's our home that comes first. They are very much on that same page. Their spouses are very much on that same page, as well as their children. So just so you know, like, what our meetings look like. It's not like, let's just jump in and make decisions. It is like, how are you doing? So Scott, how are you doing? Brad, how you doing? Daniil, how you doing? How's your marriage? What's going on in your home? What's going on in your heart? And then we literally spend the first 45 minutes of our meeting like talking to each other and praying for each other. I told these guys the first time I ever met with them, I'm like, look, it's easy to go into church and make decisions on things, but we have to press into Christ together. We very much keep each other in the loop on what's going on with our families. We already in our meetings have prayed over our own kids because parenting is difficult. But yes, that expectation definitely is full and clear. They all agree with it, and yeah, we move forward with it.
Michael, in business, I say like a leader like will hire to their weaknesses, and in this sense, it's not like hiring, but there's 3 gentlemen who are going to be there that are going to be speaking on behalf of the church and helping lead and stepping on your toes at times. And so I was wanting to know if you could help articulate some of those areas in which these 3 gentlemen are very complementary to the areas of your weakness, so that I know, so we can all know maybe the breadth of where we can see this team helping out each other.
Yeah, my weakness in ministry is that I do not know when to turn it off. I will do anything for anybody at any given time, to the own detriment of myself and to the detriment of my family. And I've seen that very, very clearly in the past year and a half. I know the things that empty me, and I know the things that fill me. What fills me is studying the Word of God, to preach, to teach, to interpret Scripture, make difficult parts of the Bible clear. When my week is filled with counseling, when my week is filled with meeting with people who are either divisive or extremely broken that require a ton of time and attention, I either have a choice to do that or prepare a sermon. I think like God's called me to preach. Now, does that mean I don't do those things? By no means. But I can't do all of it. So what I really, really look for is not guys that could like complement my weaknesses, but more like guys that are just like me, like almost to try to duplicate me. And I don't say that in like an arrogant way. I am very, very careful on who I put in front of somebody who needs deep ministry. I'm fully confident in all 3 of them that I don't need to be in a meeting with them. I could say, Scott, go meet with this person. What church is to me is one-on-one ministry. It is being able to live shoulder to shoulder, to lift people up when they're hurting. And I think like all three of these guys have the ability to stand before a couple whose marriage is broken, to stand before somebody who's completely broken and dealing with addiction, to where I can call any of them on the phone and say, Scott, can you meet with this person? Daniil, can you do this? Difficult conversations with people who need to be confronted within their sin. I'll be honest, Scott has an unbelievable ability to sit within a meeting and be quiet and to be able to speak with wisdom in situations like that. Situations that are frankly inconvenient and at the wrong time of day where I might be home with my family, I know I can call Daniil and just tell Daniil, hey, man, can you take care of this? And he will. Anytime there's ability to teach or anything like that where I need a break, Brad very much fills that role. Brad is very, very he's different than I am when it comes to like focusing on like family and stuff like that. I don't want to say I don't have any interest in that. I have a very, very keen interest on like biblical discipleship, getting people to learn the Bible, not getting necessarily like in the trenches with some of the stuff. So I think they all have gifts that are different from me, but they're a lot of the same as me to be able to release and go like minister to people, and I don't lose sleep over it.
Is this on? Just super thankful for all you guys. I can't say that enough. Maybe just 30 seconds from each one of you about your passion in one of the most important things that Pastor said about him not taking too much, because you're also passionate about being right there and doing whatever it takes, but maybe a little vulnerability on your heart about why it means so much to you that he doesn't have to do everything.
Is that on? Yeah. Getting to know Michael, everybody can see how hard he works, and it's definitely, getting to know him better through this process. We just don't want to see him. I don't want to see him burn out. And I've already been involved in some things where I feel like, this is a niche I can really fill, kind of what he just described about meeting with people in various, whatever the context may be. He needs relief from that, and I just kind of immediately was like, okay, there's a niche that I can fill to give him relief to do what he's gifted at. He needs to be up here. He needs to be casting vision. Those are his gifts. And so anyway, if that answers your question. That's how I see it.
Well, I want to answer a couple things I heard you say earlier about, step on each other's toes. Michael will tell you this already. There's been numerous occasions I've already text Michael and say, dude, you need to take a day off, or you need to rest, and if you need help with something, I'm going to be there for you, because I don't want to see him burn out, but I also want to make sure that even though he may be overwhelmed with other things, that I'm the guy he can call to, knowing that I'm going to be biblically sound, and whatever the situation may be within the church, that he has someone he can turn to at the drop of a dime. And my passion has always, will, and always continue to be, is to love people wherever you're at. I was in the lowest part of my life, and I had someone come alongside me and speak wisdom into my life, and that's where my passion is at, is with the people. I firmly believe a quote I heard many years ago. It says, your pastor and your elders, they should smell like the sheep. That means we need to be amongst you guys and loving on you wherever you may be at, because we all need the love of Christ in our lives to be the center focus, and that will and will always be my passion. I love to teach too, but my passion is for the people, truly and dearly.
I echo all of what these guys said, but to speak on, Greg, your question with, kind of dealing with the time and the weight of the role, like kind of what that requires. In my previous church, being an elder there, I would almost every Sunday be there at like 5 o'clock in the morning. So I'd leave my house at like 4, be there at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I wouldn't get home till like 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We had like one service. So it was like insane, doing a lot of stuff. week after week after week, plus all the midweek service stuff, having to drive plus I was working well, I'm still there, but 50, 60 hours a week. So to the detriment of my family, that was a lot of hard lessons learned. And I'm very cognizant of that now. You can ask my wife. She's very faithful, very gracious. She's very loving and patient, very, very patient with me. But she called those things out and in a great way. And so coming here, Michael and I have had these conversations. He is very, very conscious of that. That's kind of a thing that he gets into. That's an area once I start, I can't stop either. We both see that in each other, and we see that in all four of us. And so we're very, very protective over our time with one another, I feel like, and just to make sure that we've got boundaries and we've got things in place to where our family does come first, and we can minister there before we can be even efficient here. If that makes sense. I don't know if does that answer your question. Okay.
Well, I'll answer that too. Our meetings when we meet are at 7:30 at night, so that's pretty late. I do that because my kids go to bed at 7:30, and I know that these guys all live close by. I want to make sure they have a night with their family. I wasn't trying to fill up another night on the calendar. I figured our wives could probably use a break from us sometimes too. My wife just goes upstairs and does her Bible study homework. So yeah, we kind of structured things to do it like that for sure. Anyone else? Kara, yes. The reality of that will probably never separate fully from Desert Springs. And I want to make this abundantly clear. Without Desert Springs, we're not in here right now. Without Desert Springs, I'm a financial planner. Without Steve Ingram, I have no idea what my life would look like right now. I'd probably be chasing money. So we'll never fully break away from Desert Springs. That relationship will always be there. I respect Steve more than any other pastor I've ever met in my entire life. But again, there are markers that I think that a church should have in place to be fully independent. A huge marker is our own constitution and the establishment of elders. So that is if we're looking for a step, this is like an 80-yard step on a 100-yard football field. So that is very much, after that, we won't go to their elder meetings anymore unless we're just trying to eavesdrop on what's going on at Desert Springs. But we will break away from them in that regard at some time. I said this morning, Steve's my boss. He's not my boss. Steve can't fire me or anything. The elder board would have to do that. But I will still continue to meet with Steve. Another huge marker on being our own independent church would be having our own building. So I could just tell you all that starting next year, we're going to start to uncover some rocks to see what we could possibly move into. This place is a blessing to us, but it's also a ton of work. A lot of you do not see what happens here at 7 o'clock on Saturday mornings. And so that is another step. I think once all those things are in order, I'm pretty confident we're financially independent. So financial independence, an elder board, a constitution, and our own building are kind of the 4 steps to break away from being a church plant. But we've been financially independent since week 1. So that's one thing that's odd. So those are kind of the steps in place. But Desert Springs will always be a friendly place for us. So. All right. Well, if anything else pops up, you can feel free to reach out to me. My email is michael.stahl@saltchurchaz.com. Feel free to shoot me an email. I would love to chat with you. As you all know, I'm very open. I want deep down in my heart, I want you all to come to church here and come through those doors every single Sunday and know that you're cared for. Know that people know what your name is. They know what's going on in your life. When we get up here and make announcements like, hey, put a prayer request on the card and we'll pray for it, those get prayed for. The people who put the same requests every single week, they get prayed for every single week. We deeply, deeply care for the people of this church. And I can't tell you guys what a blessing that these guys have been to me. I also, Matt Murphy, who's sitting right there. Matt is on full-time staff. The blessing that Matt is to me. All the leaders at this church. I get all the credit, and I get to stand up here and flap my jaws every Sunday. This church would not be the place it is without, there's 34 of us eating dinner on December 5th together at Jack Thompson's house. Without those people who are in that room, they make this church go. This would be nothing without them. But, man, when I get up here on Sundays and I say we're going to do something special in this community, I believe that with all my heart. And this isn't to make a name for Salt Church. It's to make a name for Jesus Christ. We need to make Jesus Christ famous. Guys, I live in a cul-de-sac where literally my neighbor Steve plays the guitar. Lady across the street goes to CCV. My whole entire cul-de-sac sleeps in on Sunday mornings. That's sad. Those are the neighborhoods we live in. And this can become like a cultural club of Christians, or we could start to actually share our faith with people and get some non-believers in here. And we're going to see the waves of baptism water splash. We're going to see people come in here, and we're going to see people's lives changed. And we aren't going to do that, the four of us, okay? It's all of us that are going to do that. We're one church. It's not the elders are up here, the leaders are up here, the staff's up here, and y'all are down here. We do this together. But again, there does need to be some sort of oversight. So I can't tell you all how much I appreciate you giving up your Sunday night. Two Sundays in a row. Last week it was food truck night, and now tonight. I truly, truly love this church with all my heart, and you guys mean the world to me. I'm going to go ahead and close this in prayer, and then hope you all have a great week. Father, thank you so much just for tonight. Lord, I thank you for everybody who came, and God, I just ask that as we move forward in the direction that you're taking us as a church, Lord, this isn't any paramount thing that we're doing. Lord, we're establishing leadership structure that is outlined for us all throughout the New Testament. Lord, I thank you that not even 2 years in, you've brought us qualified men who fit this role. Lord, I thank you for their willingness to be able to step out aside from their normal job or anything like that and say, yeah, let's make this church what we need it to be, what you need it to be. God, I pray for Scott and Anna, and I just pray that you bless the Galicki family just in deep ways. Be with Scott as he wakes up every day and he does a job, but he also has just a burden for your people. God, I lift up Daniil and Andrea, Judah and Alex. I just pray that you protect that family. Lord, continue to fill Daniil with just the zeal that he has for you, the zeal to be able to talk to people in the lobby and make them feel cared for. God, I pray for Brad, Jess, Charlotte, and Landon, Lord, that you would be in the midst of their home as two little kids are growing up in a godly house, God, that you would kindle the flame in Charlotte and Landon's hearts so they could grow up to be men and women of you, and that you would just unite Brad and Jess together as we move forward. And then, God, obviously be in the midst of my home. Let me lead well. Let Kristen be able to bear a lot of burden that I share with her. So, God, just be in the midst of our home as well. Be with everyone here. As I pray every newcomer's dessert, Father, I just ask that when people walk through these doors, Lord, we could see this as the local church where we all need to throw in and use our gifts in order to further your kingdom. So, God, I just pray that you stir up our hearts and affections for who you are. Father, I ask that you would just be able to let us see how great you are and the work that you're doing. And, God, that you've called us, that you've set us apart to do your work in this area. So, God, I just pray that you open doors that need to be opened, close doors that need to be closed. And, Father, just lead us and guide us as a church in every single way possible as we just seek to honor and glorify you in all that we do. Lord, it's in your beautiful name I pray. Amen. Hey, thank you so much for coming. Have an awesome, awesome week. We'll see you here next Sunday.